It was a cold morning when James Carter stepped into the luxury car dealership, his heart heavy with memories. The last time he had been here was over 2 decades ago, long before life had taken him through battles both on the front lines and within himself. He adjusted his worn-out jacket, a stark contrast to the polished floor and gleaming vehicles surrounding him. He wasn't here for a car, he was here for something much bigger. But before he could take another step, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Sir, I think you're in the wrong place." James turned to see a tall man in a tailored suit, his arms crossed in disapproval. The manager, Richard Sterling, looked him up and down, his eyes lingering on the faded patches on James's jacket, badges of honor from his years of service. But to Richard, they were just signs of someone who didn't belong. "Luxury vehicles aren't for browsing, sir," Richard continued, his tone dripping with condescension. "Unless you're here to get a job as a valet, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Before James could respond, another customer walked in, this one in a designer suit, his watch gleaming under the dealership's bright lights. Richard's demeanor changed instantly. "Ah, Mr. Langston. Welcome back. We just got the newest model in stock. Let me personally show you around." James watched as Richard's attitude shifted so effortlessly, as if the very air around him had changed. He had seen this before, doors opening for some, slamming shut for others. He had fought for a country that promised equality, yet here he was, being dismissed without a second thought. If only Richard knew the truth. Before we go any further, if stories like this make you think, make you feel something, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring stories like this to life, stories that reveal the reality behind the masks people wear. Now, let's get back to it. James took a deep breath. He could have left. He could have walked out that door and let Richard bask in his ignorance. But today wasn't the day for that. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a neatly folded letter. "You might want to read this before you make any more assumptions," James said, his voice calm, controlled. Richard barely glanced at the paper before scoffing. "Sir, I don't have time for this." "Read it," James said, this time with authority. Something in his tone made Richard hesitate. With a sigh, he snatched the letter and unfolded it. As his eyes scanned the page, his confident smirk began to falter. The letterhead was unmistakable, corporate. And at the bottom, stamped with an official seal, was a name he had never heard before but suddenly mattered more than anything. James Carter. Owner. The room seemed to shrink. The air became heavy with the weight of realization. Richard's face turned pale as he looked up, his arrogance now replaced with panic. His heart pounded in his chest. Sweat beaded at his temples as he struggled to process the situation. His hands, which had moments ago been confidently crossed in front of him, now clenched into nervous fists. He glanced around the showroom, desperately searching for a way to salvage his pride. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he had misread the letter. But deep down, he knew. He had just disrespected the most important man in the building. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked around as if hoping someone would step in and save him, but all he found were the wide, stunned eyes of his employees, some whispering to each other, others looking away, unwilling to meet his gaze. The silence in the room stretched, thick with realization. One of the younger salesmen, a man who had spent months being overlooked and talked down to by Richard, let out an amused scoff. Another employee, an older woman who had seen too many men like Richard rise to power while hard-working people like her were ignored, shook her head in quiet satisfaction. Richard, realizing the weight of what had just happened, straightened his tie, trying to regain control of the moment. "Mr. Carter, I deeply apologize, sir. It was a misunderstanding." His voice, once so confident, now wavered. James let the words hang in the air. Richard swallowed hard. "Sir, I assure you, I always treat customers with the utmost Don't, James interrupted. I saw how quickly you changed the moment someone else walked in. That wasn't an accident. That was instinct. And instincts, Richard, tell you a lot about a person. The dealership was silent, every employee hanging on to James's words. And in that moment, a memory came rushing back, one that he hadn't thought about in years. James was 16 the first time someone told him he'd never amount to anything. It was a hot summer afternoon, and he had spent the entire day helping his uncle fix an old truck in their small garage. Grease covered his hands, his arms aching from the work, but he was proud. When the truck finally roared to life, he had run inside excitedly, eager to tell his uncle. That's when he overheard the conversation. He's a good kid, his uncle had said, smart. Hardworking. He just needs someone to believe in him. And then, the reply. A cold, dismissive chuckle. A black kid from this neighborhood? He'll be lucky if he gets a job washing cars. That's the best he can hope for. James never forgot those words. Those words echoed in his mind for years, surfacing at every challenge he faced. They were there when he struggled in the military, when he built his first business from nothing, when he sat in boardrooms filled with people who doubted him. But instead of breaking him, they fueled him. Every doubt thrown his way became a reason to push harder. And now, standing in the middle of his own dealership, staring into the eyes of a man who had judged him the same way, he felt the weight of that moment all over again. He took a deep breath. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. He had already done that. This was about making sure that no young man walked into this dealership and felt like he wasn't good enough. James looked around at the employees. Things are going to change around here, he said, his voice steady. Starting now. Richard, desperate, stepped forward. Mr. Carter, please. If you'd allow me another chance, I can. You've already had your chance, James cut in. Now it's time for someone else to have theirs. Richard's shoulders slumped. He knew. This was it. Turning to the rest of the staff, James continued, from now on, this place will be about respect. For the employees. For the customers. For anyone who walks through that door. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Employees who had felt invisible for years suddenly felt seen. This wasn't just about a car dealership. This was about something much bigger. If this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you handle it? And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories that challenge the way we see the world. Until next time.